Okay, welcome to Pass the Mic for Friday, August 18th, 2023, episode 82. Michael Pihoti here on Zoom. Joining me, Mr. Michael Gervasi.
What's up?
Welcome, welcome. We're ahead of the schedule. We've been recording Thursday nights. We're actually recording this early on Wednesday, so we're ahead of the game this week. Our schedules are a little more. We're on top of things. Not last minute. We actually discussed possibly recording. You're working the scrimmage tomorrow.
I am
testing out the new clock, but some calendar things popped up for me that made that hard to do. All right, feedback and errors. I don't know if there were any errors last week when we talked about our back to school special. It was our back to school special. I listened to other podcasts that was their back to school special, but they aren't really education topics. They were just talking about funny things from their days in school. But it was our back to school episode, and then our over underrated Canada, because we talked about Windsor. What do you have? Did you get any feedback? I got a couple things. You want to start us off?
I got a lot about Canada. I'll start with family-friendly show. But I'm giving a shout out. I won't even say who this is. I should mention the strip clubs in Windsor. I'll leave
adult entertainment establishments.
I'll leave it there.
I don't even know I always remember the running joke was Danny's. Wasn't Danny's a
Danny's? Yeah, that was always
the gentleman for the gentlemen and performers.
Yeah. You ever worked there?
You reminded me of that Chris Farley clip from Chris Farley and Patrick Swayze.
Yeah,
and a funny story about that. From what I think, the guy Bob Ordnick, from Better Call Saul, was a writer. I'm pretty sure, I might be messing this up, but I'm pretty sure he wrote that script, that scene, okay. And he had hesitations about it later in life because he felt that it was almost a little too harsh on Chris Farley.
Yeah, Chris, I remember hearing that too, but Chris Farley himself didn't really.
It wasn't. Yeah, but of course he was going through a lot during all that. I think that was, and I think it's just one of those things you look back at. It's just, and of course I thought it's most people in our generation, that clip. I mean, both of those guys are tragically died at young ages.
Right, good point.
Again, pass the mic. What the jinx of pass the mic? We always bring up these guys.
We uplift here. Underrated. Throwing out. This is Antoine. Throwing out or losing Canadian loonies and toonies because you couldn't spend them over here. I never thought about that.
Yeah. Our friends to the south are much more generous with using the American currency than the friends to the north.
Yeah, I was mocked for the sample cologne. Stopping to get sample cologne
duty free
all day, and I quote this from Deontay in Arizona: "A cheap ass." End quote. That was what I was called for doing that. And then he mentioned the passport thing to get into Canada was recent, even after 9/11. See, I'd love to know when this became a thing. He was able to get over to Canada as recent as 2003-4, quite frequently because he was dating somebody from there. So I found that to be interesting.
Okay.
And I'm just giving you all this stuff. Elizabeth Pate mentioned the basketball analogy. She really liked that related, starting the school year, relating it to layups.
Oh, the layup, yeah.
Yeah. And then Max Bailey, a frequent listener, brought up some pretty good ones. He thought Most Nice was pretty funny. But the commercial tastes great, less filling, and I must be in the front row.
When you did your commercial thing. That's right. Yeah, you can watch those on YouTube. They're pretty funny. John Madden, Bob Uecker, Rodney Dangerfield was always the butt of jokes. There's a softball game one where Rodney's like the game's tied or something, and he's the last hitter or something. It's just there's some classics. Max also brought up, and this is a good overrated one, overrated Tim Hortons, and that is exactly true. Other than their standard coffee is excellent.
Is it excellent? I mean,
or good. It's good. It's not okay. I have no issue. If you had to say go get a coffee anywhere, that's like a fast service place, McDonald's, Tim Hortons, Dunkin' Donuts. Dunkin' Donuts is pretty good. Dunkin's good too, but I think Tim Hortons standard coffee is good. Their baked goods, not a fan.
I'm not as a coffee drinker, and I also drink cappuccinos and stuff like that. If I'm ranking just the places I could think of, Panera, Dunkin' Donuts, Tim Hortons, McDonald's, so forth and so on. I'm putting Tim Hortons near the bottom, just in front of Starbucks for their coffee. I think some of the
You're talking about their fancier drinks, though. I'm talking about their straight
I'm just
coffee.
talking coffee right now. Straight coffee. To me, Starbucks and Tim Hortons are near the bottom. Actually, Starbucks is at the bottom. And I like Starbucks. I like a lot of their other things. I like their ambiance, but I do not like their coffee. but Tim Hortons is above them. But I like Dunkin', I like McDonald's, so and Panera. But again, the other things I think are pretty good. But I'm with you on the Tim Hortons baked goods.
Underrated. I just wanted to give the Ren Dog. And if you want to know why he calls Nick Gagne a Canadian boy, you're going to have to ask the Ren Dog. I'm not revealing it here to the masses, but he said, how could I do a whole episode on Canada and not mention Canadian boy Nick Gagne? Now, why he was given that nickname, we'll have to have the Ren Dog on to explain that. Because
maybe we'll do the call-in show again this year, and I'm sure.
So yeah, the 2-year anniversary, and maybe he can. I was just talking to Coach Crampton today. She's like, we got to get the Ren Dog back on after his non-tackling of the fan at Comerica. He's also working events at Ford Field too, so he's out and about. So if you're going down to some big events, elementary, and again, I have the utmost respect for elementary teachers. I think we downplayed the importance of supplies at the secondary level. I had an elementary teacher reach out to me and say, hey, it's still kind of a big deal at the elementary level, because we have this many kids. And I sort of get that. They do a lot more, really at the secondary level. If you have your Chromebook and a pen and some paper, I don't know what else you're really going to need. Like, really, whereas I get down at the elementary level, that's a little different. So I'm sure those supply lists are a little more important. Sure. I also tend to believe that about 3-4 years down the road, as COVID is in our back window, as far as the shutdown, obviously, if you look at cases, it's back up. But like the federal money is also in the back window, I think those supply lists will start becoming a little more prevalent because that's just the way it works, right? Like all that stuff is temporary. And then I also want to give a shout out to Tom Pack. He did another great photo collage, which included my state association's logo. Like it was in there. He found the Mazel Michigan Association of School Librarians. He's a detective. Like, he's one of those online detectives. Want to wish him good luck. He's been posting a lot on the booster page, ready to get started with Shoemate football. Coach Pack.
Go Hawks! Yeah.
Yeah,
so he's coach, correct?
7th grade coach, I believe. Ready? Yeah, he's man. He's on the ball. I've seen he's having had some training, some off-season stuff. So good for him. He'll do a great job. I've coached with him. Never really, because of Nate and his boy's age, just the gap difference. I never really had to coach much, but he was always in flag football, the same basketball leagues. It would always just be sometimes a year behind of where I was. So, all right, this week I saw it. Like if you're on again. I'm not going to lie. A lot of these ideas I get on TikTok. A lot of our colleagues are back to work, right, in other states.
Mike, let me interrupt. Are we going to go Mike of the week first?
Oh, you're Mike of the week. I'm sorry. Yes, you're Mike of the week.
Okay, so listen. The reason why I interrupted you, I had a
mic. I messed up.
That's all right. So I had a mic, another derivative, and then I changed it before we even started. Like right when we started, before you hit the start button. Do you know where this is going? Any chance you know where it's going? It's a derivative of the name Mike.
I have absolutely no clue.
A very divisive
Scott Mitchell.
No, not Scott Mitchell. Oh, that's a pretty good one too. Very divisive local figure who writes for the Free Press.
We're talking.
Yeah.
So you're stretching this to Mitch.
Mitch, another derivative. I looked it up.
Okay. It is okay.
I was going to do a different Mitch.
I hope I can find a picture of him he's tall enough to appear in a picture.
Oh, come on, man! You didn't say that, did you? I was actually going to do a different Mitch for Max Bailey and Kent Sikora, amongst some others that listen. But I'm doing Mitch Albom because you brought him up, and it's really weird because for me personally, I cannot think, I just mentioned he's very divisive around here, very polarizing figure. Even for me personally is because he used to do, before sports talk radio was a thing, he used to do a sports talk radio like Sunday Night Show with Mike Stone.
I remember that.
And I thought he was pretty good. And he's pretty, he wrote the Fab Five book. I thought that was pretty good. But, since that time, there's been some holes poked in that a little bit. He wrote an article that got him in a lot of hot water around 2005 about seeing Mateen Cleaves at the Final Four. And Mateen Cleaves was not at the Final Four. So that was, he was called out for that, obviously.
So a little bit of fiction.
I know he's written books that really are popular around here. The Five People You Meet in Heaven?
Tuesdays with Maury.
So I haven't read those books, admittedly. I just know there's been times where he's written articles where I'm like, man, he really nailed that one. And then other articles where I'm like, God, he needs to give it up. He sounds like a very, very angry older person. And sure enough, I guess I'll let you take the reins on this one. Why I chose Mitch Albom. What did he do that ticked you off this weekend?
So I sent a text in our group text. and again, I think ever since the success of his books, and which were one of them was made into a movie, you know, he used to be a sports columnist, right? Like that
Yeah.
was what he was way back in the
Mhm.
day. And then he got popular, and he's now just basically a general columnist that will once in a while connect back into sports, but he's mainly just. And he wrote this article in the Free last week about basically, and people say we're get off your lawn, our lawn, guys. I mean, it's basically this whole thing about against apps and technology, and we need this sort of moratorium on this creation of new stuff. And I'm getting, you know, and basically, and yes, we've talked about this. Social media has a negative impact, but we've also talked about how it can have a positive impact. And it's also not one of these things where, you know, no one walks. I don't think I don't see this in this day and age of anymore. It used to be for a little while. It's like, oh, you're not on Facebook. You're not. I don't hear that anymore from people. If you know, if you walk and say I'm not on TikTok, people aren't like, oh my God, you got to get on. You know what I mean? I think people have
Sure.
gotten to this era of like, okay, this is what I'm on, and I'm fine with it. You're not on this, that's fine. There's something we'll get to overlap with, but I don't think there's ever this. Do you feel like there's pressure that you got to be like when this new competitor for Twitter came out that Facebook has? I didn't even add it. I don't, you know, I don't even know what it is. I forget what it is, but I know they did it. I don't jump on every one. And so he just wrote this long, and it sounds like get off my lawn. You know, can we just not have these new like tech? And part of me wanted to like comment on the story because of course comments on Facebook are always and be like, sure, Mitch, why don't you turn in your laptop too and write your next story on a typewriter, like on an IBM? Okay, like you know, like so.
Yeah.
And I get the premise of the story, but I think sometimes he writes about a problem that's he's writing about a solution to a problem that's
Yeah.
he makes it a bigger deal. So I'll put him on the wall. I'm no height jokes there. I'm sure there's a picture of him where you can see him above his shoulders, and you know, and I'm sure he'll, you know, yeah. I don't even know if he's
So
on the radio. He used to be on the sports reporters on ESPN too,
he
right? He was
was,
always on
yeah.
that. Yeah, yeah. So all right, so we will add him to the wall now. As I was saying before I cut you off before the mic of the week, I was on TikTok. I noticed a lot of our colleagues in other states were doing their PD like last week. You know, a lot of schools are starting this week. Those schools that start pre-Labor Day are, you know, I know my friend Angelo posted pictures of his boys starting in Indiana, first day of school yesterday, which meant PD was last week. So it made me think of, okay, we did our back to school special, but like I'm going to allow you now, and again, PD days, as we know from being in the profession, they're usually bad. All right. There's let's just say the occasional good one does come up and we learn something good and there's something in there. But if you had to make a bet, like if you were going in and putting a wager down, you probably bet on disappointment. Like if you had to survey a staff. And again, this is no, I'm not trying to badmouth anyone, but this is just go watch any of these TikToks of these teacher PDs. I was watching these
Yeah.
people down in Houston and like, you know, and so I thought, okay, put up or shut up. And I think some of our best PD days are when our administrators turn to our coaches. I know you tease uh, what do you call Kelly? Marty Morningwig? No,
No, I call him
Matt,
Matt Patricia,
Matt Patricia.
but Matt
Kelly
Patricia was
Warren and
one.
Trish Boucher create a lot. And, you know, and it's not for lack of trying people. Some things are just the way it is. Like this is something the county's handing down. You're going to learn this. The state is
Yes.
handing this down. So some things your hands are tied. But I think a lot of our best stuff is staff developed and created. And I don't want to steal any thunder. So with that, I want to know, I want you to create your perfect PD day.
Yeah. So first
Because
of
like
all,
put up or shut up. If you're going to complain about something, that's like we always say, if you're going to complain about the way something is, okay, then what's your solution? So what's your
right.
perfect PD day?
Well put. Yeah, and you know, our overrated, underrated kind of goes with this too, right?
Yep.
So I think everything's going to kind of tie in here. My perfect PD day is this. You know, I think of the dog days of the school year, so to speak. You're 100 days in, you know, February-ish, you know, early February, and you're teaching a lesson. Just hypothetically, I'll speak anecdotally from my perspective. I'm teaching a lesson on supply and demand. How do I get through this? Like to me, it's just the mental health aspect for everybody involved. But how do I get through the dog days of the school year when you're in February trying to teach a lesson to the kids? You know, how do I get through this? I think that is the most important part because you know you get into March and April, you could sort of start to see the end. You know, you have spring break that's on the horizon. November, you have Thanksgiving and Christmas break on the horizon. But how do we get to the dog days of the school year when it's early February and spring break is almost 2 months away, and a lot of years it is 2 months away? How do you get through this and keep the kids interested and keep your sanity at that point? So that's my professional development to start the year. How do we get through that part of the year?
I want to give credit to something that the local district was listened to as we did negotiations. We used to have like 2.5 days of the 3 days was all PD at the start of the year. And it sort of punched you in the, I'll say it didn't punch you in the gut, it punched you square in the nose. Like you come in, you're ready and fresh, and all of a sudden you're sitting there for 2 full days and a half day. And and we said like a good, if only 20% of that is something that you're really into and like, that's a lot of time of, my goodness, you know what I mean? And so what
Sure.
we said to them in negotiation was like, hey, can we cut that down at the beginning? Maybe add a little more time to work in your rooms and then spread that other day out somewhere in the rest of the year. And administration was great about it. They're like, that's how you guys feel. As long as we get this many hours in, we have no problem taking that from the beginning and spread it around. So I think, first of all, that's the first thing. For some reason, a lot of these districts feel like the first couple days has to be PD down your throat.
Yeah. Right.
And you're like, my goodness, I was excited about starting the year. And so I want to give a shout out to Gibraltar and our administrations for listening to that, saying, hey, this is how our people feel. Can we cut back on some of this? And they did. They did. If you look at our calendar this year, I think it's 1 day of PD and 1.5 of time of like staff meeting and then working on your own stuff. So I think that's a key thing. So in a way, I sort of made mine as a list of things not to have.
Okay.
So no getting up and walking around the room and writing things on large pieces of paper. I don't need to do that. I've got a bachelor's degree. I've got an advanced degree. You present, I can learn it. I'll understand it. I don't have to go get a Sharpie and write on the corner of a board in a fancy color. I got it. I got this. I don't know. Do doctors do this? Do airline pilots do this? Do they get into a big room and they're like, hey, we found, hey, does Captain Sully go, hey, everyone go around right on the corner how you will land if you crash into some birds? I don't know. For some reason, us as teachers, that's a big thing. All right. No icebreakers. All right. Unless there's a new person in the room. I hope everyone had a great summer. I'll talk about it with you at lunch or breakfast. I don't need to tell you, what's going on there. I don't need to tell you how many walks I took Ella on. By the way, Ella making another appearance and pass the mic. She's up here. We went on a 5 a.m. walk this morning. She got her episode of People's Court in at 10. It was a dog case, so she was excited. All right. I like the idea of multiple short sessions, right? You don't want a 3-hour session. You want like something that can be, when we do the roundtable things, like in the back half of the year, where it's like, they take an hour and a half, 2 hours at the end of the day, and you go to like 3 30-minute things or 4 30-minute things, right? Especially if there's choices involved. I think about like good conferences you go to, you get a list of like,
I agree.
15 options. You go to 15 options and you pick, 4 or 5 of them, and that's what you learn. So you actually get you buy in on it. And I get it. I understand that's not how all PD can be done, but our people do a lot of that where they're sort of like roundtables. So multiple short sessions, lunch on your own outside of the building. You can leave and decompress and go hang out with other people. And I think, like I said, I sort of hinted it at the start of this. The best stuff that we tend to have, I've had some good stuff from Risa here and there over the years. We've talked about it. The best stuff has been my colleagues sharing tips, plans, apps, websites, things that they have learned and come across, right? That is, to me, whether they be teachers, administrators, counselors, our coaches, our administrators at the board office, things that they do and use, which include, we've done some mental health things, right? Like they've built that in as part of our PD. To me, that's the best. So that's my perfect PD day, a combination of getting rid of those things I said and building it upon those others. So,
man, you killed my overrated and underrated. I got a little bit.
Oh, well, I will. I mean, it's all right. I mean, that's
all right. I'm just
all
kidding.
right. So with that, we'll lead into that. So overrated, underrated is teacher work days, not necessarily PD. Teacher work day too is the day you go in and get to do whatever you want. So it's basically a day where there's no kids there, right?
Yeah.
Which for us is mainly PD, but there are also the teacher work days that are legit. Hey, here's some time. Go meet with your department or go, put up posters in your room. So with that, what do you have as overrated teacher work day? Sorry if I stole anything.
No, it's all right because I kind of combine the two. And again, we don't prepare for this very much together, right?
We just threw out what our education topic was and overrated, underrated.
So, man, my immediate thought, and you mentioned some of the things, but there's one thing you didn't mention. I'm glad you didn't. My immediate thought was 212. And so I'm going to lead that. The overrated is, and I do think that our recent administrators have understood this better, and maybe it's because we've all kind of grown together, and we're all about the same age. So as we get a little bit older, we're sort of understanding each other better. Those platitudes that start the year, those speeches, they don't work. They're again, the 212 thing we've mentioned on the show before. We watched this video some years back, that was supposed to be inspirational. 212, and it's become
For those of you that are not chemistry majors,
yeah.
we'll explain it. So water, and for those of you in our European friends, we got to really explain it. Water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit in our Fahrenheit scale. At 211 degrees, it's not boiling at all. It's just hot water. But at 212, that if you go from that extra degree, that becomes steam, and then steam can power a locomotive. So basically, the moral of this presentation to all of us was, hey, go that extra degree and you can move mountains or move locomotives. And so still to this day, many years down the road, we ask people in the hallway, hey, what degree you at? What temperature you at? Where are you at? And, some days you're at 185, some days you're at some days you are at 212. Then there's some days where you're at like 48 degrees Fahrenheit. You're just, cold as, I won't even say cold as ice because that's not freezing, but
and these cliches,
but it's stuck with us.
It did as a humorous bit, as a bit.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
I'm at 106 today. I'm halfway there.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just throwing it out to you, like, and they don't work, especially as you get older. It's like, in sports, you have coaches that their message eventually just doesn't land. At a certain point, you have veteran staffs, and I think we are right. And these things are so that's my overrated. We don't need to hear, especially things like 212.
And speaking of sports, Michael Jordan was once cut from his varsity basketball team. Did you know that? So you should never quit.
Thank you for telling me. I wasn't aware. I'm not even going. You're not baiting me into this one.
That's an even over bit. My overrated.
It's funny too, Mike, about that story. Even on the text thread with all basketball people, we will argue that. And there's people that still buy into this narrative. He was not cut. Okay, go on.
If you know the story, you know the story.
Yeah.
My overrated ties back into what, so I sort of stole my own thunder. My overrated is provided lunch in-house. Provided lunch in-house. It sounds like it's a nice feature and it's this and that. Yeah. Oftentimes I would rather just go.
It's a bait and switch.
I'd rather just go, and I understand the provided lunch does one thing, it locks you in so that no one's late for that second half session or whatever. But back in the day, when we were in trimesters, when we had 3 days for exam, there was a lot of opportunities to go out to lunch with your colleagues, and it was always nice, right? Like that's always a nice feature these days. Yes. So the overrated in-house provided lunch, I'm not even talking about the food quality per se. It's just the idea. Then there's this line of like 50 people, like 50, 60 people. If they invite the middle school over, there's even more. If you're in the back half of it, you end up with like, what is this, ham and cheese on a, it's like, I'd rather just, hey, you got 45, most other professions, here's your lunchtime, go out and go to where you want to lunch. Everyone doesn't go to the same place, so you get some time. And so my overrated is provided lunches. I guess that ties back into my perfect PD day. I would just say, all right, you have an hour, please be respectful, be back on time, and go where you want. If you want to just eat, whatever, but that's my overrated. What is your underrated?
My underrated kind of goes with that because, part of the lunch experience is the camaraderie you get to have. And you just look around, and you see that we're all glad to see each other again. As much as maybe the start of the school year, it really is overwhelming. I think of myself every Friday in September, I am just exhausted by the time I get home because it's just, so many things coming at you at once. But when you look, if you just take a moment, and I'm sure administrators see this, when you look at when the teachers are just allowed to get caught up with each other, hey, how was your summer, all those things, I think it's awesome. And so that's why I'm with you. So I'm going with the teachers, just the overall camaraderie with your colleagues, the ability to catch up with each other, the ability, I haven't seen a lot of people all summer. It's been a few months, and we'd like to get back together and, rib each other and all that stuff. So I'm just going the camaraderie itself altogether, which is why getting the lunch on our own is so valuable, because that to me the bait and switch of lunch within
provided lunch.
Sorry, thank you. It is nothing more than an ability to get us to pound us with more platitudes for an extra 15 or 20 minutes that we could have otherwise. So I'm going teacher camaraderie is the underrated.
You tied right into I wrote in my note this time with coworkers, and that's everybody, administrators, because just being able to, hey, how was it? You're right. I've seen very few people. Obviously, I've seen you. I've seen Rocky now coaching, here and there. Last night, Scope and Rice popped up at this event for the Sims run that we were planning. Saw Max Bailey, but it's just time to say, I don't need to do it like this presentation of Icebreaker. Let me talk to a group of people and
Yeah,
say, hey, how
right.
was your summer and that sort of thing, and say, oh, how's this and that, you know. And so that's, to me, again, it's that social time with coworkers. I think it's very important, especially if you're in the profession we are, where you're working as, you know, we have our individual classrooms and we have our individual responsibilities, but we all have the same goal. We're working together to educate these children, prepare them, and have them graduate and prepare them to move on. And if you want that to work well, you do need a staff. And that's one great thing about our building. I think our staff does work very well with each other. We have, you know, we have concern for each other when things go wrong. So again, I totally agree with you. That's the best part about teacher work days, is catching up, you know, hearing about the summer and that sort of thing. So hey, we're on the same wavelength there. Well done. Okay, hot mic take for the week. What do you have for us here on August 18th?
Okay, so my
26th?
hot mic was originally going to be an education topic, but I'm going to hold off. I'm going to put that one aside because I think it will generate some discussion. However, we've kind of beat education to death today, so I'm gonna go off course and just kind of go off script. As I was reading some of my notes here on my phone, I came across a discussion that some friends and I had. Let me ask you, and I'm not trying to gotcha you. Okay, I promise you, I'm not doing that. Do you know who Sean Marion and or Amare Stoudemire is? Well, is. They're both alive, so is.
Well, Stoudemire was a basketball player, right?
Yes.
Phoenix.
Yes.
Okay. Was Marion a football player?
He was a basketball player as well.
Oh, he was a basketball player as well. I'm thinking of a San Diego Charger. Okay. I obviously remembered Stoudemire. I don't remember Marion that much.
So these guys are, I mean, Sean Marion hasn't been out of the NBA for more than a decade. They were both very good basketball players. And the question came up on a text thread, should these guys be Hall of Famers? And it led to a whole discussion. And this is, I'm going to throw this out to this is more of a sports related question. The NBA has seemingly a very low bar of getting in the Hall of Fame. For example, he's one of my all-time favorite players, and you know, definitely top 5. But I do not feel like Joe Dumars should be in the Hall of Fame as a player. A very, very good player. Go on. What are you thinking?
Well, I just want to make sure. So in the Basketball Hall of Fame, it's not the NBA Hall of Fame, right? It's about the whole. It's a Basketball Hall of Fame. So I wonder if his career in the NBA, and then maybe I know it was a short stint in the front office. He won a title as a front office guy too. I'm just trying to think. You know, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with your thought. I'm just trying to, because I know they're different. Like, what would you say? Would you say the MLB is the toughest?
Yeah,
right.
Right.
By far. I mean, Lou Whitaker's not in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame, and we're not even talking about blacklisting. We're not talking about the Pete Roseberry bonds.
Sure.
You know, but we're talking like, okay, Lou Whitaker's legit. There's legit really good players that for some reason didn't make it. And then I think like the NFL is sort of like a lower tier. There are some guys that you hear sort of get in that are sort of like, you know, and then they have sort of like this, you know, veterans thing and that sort of thing. But I think from what I read and see the names, usually with basketball, it seems to be a little more even easier than the NFL.
And that's, you know, I kind of just want, what's the criteria? It just seems like, and maybe the point is to not have a criteria and judge each individual on his or her own merits, which is fine. But that's where I was going with this, man. Baseball seems to have this unbelievably high standard.
Yeah.
You mentioned Barry Bonds as an example. You know, we don't know when he started probably doing steroids. I think anybody would agree with that. I don't think I'm saying anything controversial here, but he was a great player before. Roger Clemens was a great player before.
Yep.
I know they're blacklisted, but man, those were 2 of the best players in their sport. Again, I love Joe Dumars, but nobody at any point in his career would have suggested he was the best or even second best shooting guard. There might be some debate on that because he was so good defensively. But when I think of him, you know, and I think of some other great positional players that played his spot, you know, he's nowhere near what Dwayne Wade was. He's nowhere near what Kobe Bryant was. And again, those guys are the high standard, but and again, he's just one of many that I think the fact that Sean Marion and Amare Stoudemire were mentioned on this text thread, and in fairness, it was Antoine that brought it up. They are not, nobody thought they should be, but they could become Hall of Famers. And that to me is, therein lies the difference. You mentioned Lou Whitaker. I mean, he was one of the best 2 or 3 second basemen through a lot of his career. And he's probably not going to make it. And it's just odd to me what these sports do with their Hall of Fames, because I mean, this is the criteria. This is the pinnacle. You were a great player. But what is the standard in this sport versus this sport? And again, you mentioned basketball. It's a basketball Hall of Fame. But Joe Dumars, for the success that he had in the 03-04 Pistons teams and a little bit thereafter, a lot of people thought it was kind of luck. I'm not one of them, because he did hold out. The trade was Grant Hill, who actually had signed with the Orlando Magic, and it was a sign and trade. And he held out for Ben Wallace, Hall of Famer Ben Wallace. Again, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
A Hall of Famer Ben Wallace. But after that, a lot of people thought his career in the front office was a failure in a lot of ways. He made a lot of signings that a lot of Pistons fans don't like. Some of the most infamous signings. He has one of the most infamous draft picks in NBA history in Darko Milicic. So, what exactly is the criteria? And God, I hate having it Joe Dumars, because again, he is one of my top 5 all-time favorite NBA players, maybe number 3. But that's just, it seems like a low bar in one sport versus a very high bar in others.
Here's the thing I'll add to it just to wrap it up, and I'm not a math guy by any stretch. You're dealing with a smaller core group of people.
Sure.
Just by roster sizes. We mentioned the NFL and we mentioned Major League Baseball. Right? Major League Baseball has a 40-man roster. Now that's not who's all playing, obviously, but you're up into the mid 20s, right? I forget what the 23. What is it? I'm sure we'll get Max will correct us.
25. Right.
Yeah, yeah. And so you have a bigger pool
Sure.
of talent that is playing, whereas the NBA, you've had a smaller pool of talent over the years. Plus, through recent expansion, teams have added, but it was also one of the smaller leagues number of teams wise. NFL, when you think about it, if you almost probably did like a ratio of players, the NFL might be the most selective because you talk about the number of players that are on a roster over the number of years.
That's fair point.
But I'm sure that plays a point in it. There's just been less shooting guards than there have been second basemen, or infielders in Major League Baseball. Just something to throw that out there and look at it. Okay, my hot mic take. It's a big news story. And I had it in my notes for last week, but I wanted to talk about my Detroit visit. So I'm sure by now everyone's seen the devastating fires out in Lahaina in Maui, the island of Maui. I was very fortunate. My dad took us there as in elementary school as a family vacation. And I fell in love with it then in 6th grade. And then my wife and I went there on our honeymoon way back in June of '98. And we said one day, I think I mentioned this, I'm not a repeat traveler person. I don't like going to the same place over and over. I like to see new places, but we decided one year on vacation, we wanted to take our kids there. And so we did that again. So it was that's 3 times for me. That's a lot going to a same place, and when I saw the story and we would stay in Kaanapali, which is near Lahaina. But that was sort of like the town you'd go walk. It's basically, it's like the town you'd go walk through. And just to me, the devastation, and as more and more got out, and you heard that like they thought they had this fire contained. And I remember too, like a lot of the building, it's such an old town. It's the old capital of Hawaii. It's an old whale fishing village. Everything was like wood. You know what I mean? Like, so if you look, and we went back and we looked at old pictures and videos, and just ultimate devastation. And, and I think people, and I'm seeing a lot of stuff now, like people always saved up for all this whole trip and I still want to go. I couldn't imagine. I mean, I know there's other parts of that island, but I couldn't even imagine wanting to be there right now. Let these people, I mean, they're still finding bodies. And I've mentioned this before, and it's now the most deadly fire that passed the one in California. I forget the name of the one in California. That's the one I read the book on. I don't know if I have my book up here. I think it's at work. I forget the name of the fire in California. And I read this book, and there's a Netflix special on it. We are sort of sheltered from this idea of wildfires. And I think if you talk to people from California or what's going on in Canada, the danger that can drop on and that's like what happened to these people. Like one minute you're driving and it just looks like it's windy or whatever, and the next minute you're surrounded and there's nowhere to go. A tornado, you can hope that you don't get hit by something flying or it moves past. There's nowhere to go around a wildfire. So again, I am heartbroken for the people there. I'm heartbroken. It's a beautiful island, a beautiful town. I understand there's a lot of natives that are on, upset with people, and I get it. I could totally understand. And if you have plans to go, I'd sort of like say, put the brakes on it, maybe donate or something. And I understand too, you save up a lot of money, and that these trip places. And again, this is a little. If you ever spend a lot of money on a trip, pay for travel insurance. It sucks because you're already spending like $4,000 or $5,000, right? And it says, hey, for another $375, do you want travel insurance? Buy the travel insurance. Just do it. Um, you know, just that's I just again I love the town. I probably wasn't going back again because again I wasn't gonna be a 4-time person, but still on this laptop that I'm recording this on, I have a picture of the kids on Mount Haleakala as the sunrise. It's the most peaceful I've ever been. It's top 5 locations I've ever been. I hope, but man, it's just leveled. It's just leveled. Man, wildfires are something to be not to be messed with. So, all right. Well, Lions preseason, strike up the parade. What are your thoughts? Now, listen, we got some bad news, breaking news. Max Bailey, what's his text? Who was our number 1 receiver is out, and
Monra, St. Brown, we don't know. I mean, we haven't looked at
he left practice. He left practice. I mean, we don't want to be like giving breaking news here.
I'm not
So
doing
were you satisfied with? I mean, first of all, let's be realistic.
Okay.
They came back in the 4th quarter. That's not the teams that are going to be playing. That's not the Giants that will be playing in a few weeks.
Right.
That's not the Lions that are going to be playing.
Right.
So you really look at, okay, how this first drive go and how did some individual players do?
Yeah.
How do you feel?
The rookie Brian Branch looked really good. Jahmyr Gibbs, it's hard to say, not a lineman there, so it's really hard. It's really difficult. But with the rookies themselves, I was impressed, especially with Branch. So strike up the parade for him. But Mike, again, I don't know. I want the listener to know your text messages during the game were somewhat obnoxious.
I told him I wanted to watch the Tiger. Wasn't it Tigers Red Sox that night?
Tigers Red Sox that night, and I don't put any stock whatsoever in. My daughter's trying to mess with me here in the background. I don't put any stock whatsoever in any preseason game, as has been pointed out many times. The year the Lions went 0-16, they were 4-0 in the preseason. So I am withholding any judgment whatsoever. I'm not planning a parade based upon the victory that they had. Maybe they'll get one Saturday over the Jacksonville Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence, great young quarterback. But again, I will withhold any judgment whatsoever from anything in preseason, except for how some of these young guys look.
Is Goff even playing in this game? I heard Bridgewater is going to get a lot of.
I think Bridgewater. I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's going to be Bridgewater. I think. Don't quote me on that for sure. But I think.
Is it like the 3rd game then where they play like a quarter maybe?
I don't know how it works now because there's only 3 preseason games. So.
I will say there's something that really cool that happened, and I want to give a shout out because this is back when I had season tickets, and I think this guy's a class act and he's good at his job. Is Lomas Brown was informed that he was going to be in the Lions Ring of Honor, or what do they call it, Lions Pride.
Yeah.
And he when I had my that he was there back in that era of the late 90s, and I think he's just a great guy in the community. He seems like he'd be like the friendliest guy. Just here, him as a Dan Miller and him compared to what it was in the era before.
Mark Champion and Brandstatter.
Yeah, and I like Champion, but Brandstatter to me weighed everything down. He was such an awful homer in everything. And I get it. You're your home, but I mean, Lomas isn't to the point where he's obnoxious about it. Like he's happy about stuff and whatnot, but he isn't whining about every call. Since he's played the game more recently, I think he's obviously more realistic about it. So I think there's not such a more deserving guy as Lomas Brown. Just a great guy, great at his job. And I just sort of get the feel watching him that like they showed videos of him like interacting with people and teammates talking about him. I think it's for me, as I know you get on my case of bashing the Lions. I'm not going to bash the Lions with that. Lomas Brown is definitely a great guy. So
I wanted to, before you go, anything else, I want to find this guy. As you mentioned, Lomas. God, I wish I could. The Lions preseason game. So the local broadcast was Devin Gardner is the commentator, former Michigan quarterback, and his name is Jason Ross. He was the broadcaster with Devin Gardner, and I cannot find him now, but he wrote a really cool he had a really cool tweet. I don't know what Twitter is called anymore, X or whatever, so what you call that, but he wrote a really cool one. He is brand new at this, and he started hold on, Mike, I might be able to find this. It's a really neat story what he wrote on Twitter. Basically, a year ago, he was, or 2 years ago, here we go. 4 years ago, sorry. I snuck into the network TV booth at Ford Field in hopes of meeting Jim Nance to learn about calling NFL games. Last night, I called my first Lions TV in the exact same booth.
Wow.
So pretty neat story.
Hey,
tweeted this out. He looks like he's like not a day over 25. I don't know too much about him except that when the game started, Max asked me who he was. I said, I don't know. He looks really young. And then he tweeted that out. So pretty cool story.
Yeah, that is cool. That's, like that's a dream profession and career. We'll be starting in our booth a week from Thursday, right?
Yeah.
Carlson versus
8 days
Airport.
from today. Carlson
Huron
versus a
League.
good game.
Huron League throwback for all you Carlson Marauders that are class of, I think, 96, 97 and prior. That was our old Huron League days. And got that going on. The Sims run is Saturday. You can still sign up. You can sign up online. You can sign up that day. Simpsonian race over on Grozeal. 8:30 is the mile fun run, and then the 5K to follow. Looks like the weather's going to be beautiful, so come on out for that. And this is next week, our last full week officially off. I have some work days in there. We got prep day in there, and then it's back to the PD, right?
Yep, there we go. We're back, baby.
Year 26 for me. Year what for you?
20. Wait, 19,
I don't mean to put you on the spot here.
20.
Oh, nice. All right. So there it is. Have a great week, everybody, and we will see you next week.